But you know, you're speaking of not being traditional and so on, reminds me of the very first time I heard your voice. This was on a record, long before I had the joy of hearing you in the flesh. And a colleague of mine was a great opera buff, and he came to me and he said, "This is the most marvelous new voice I have heard, and you must come and listen to this." This was a old 78 recording.
Yes, and it must have been the Cetra ones, Norma, Puritani, and Isolde. The very first ones I did.
This was Qui la Voce.
Yes, my favorite opera, one of my favorite operas.
And it sounded to me, it reminded me more than anybody else I have heard of Rosa Ponselle.
Well, you see, I can answer that, Mr. Downs. We come from the old schooling. I had the good fortune of having De Hidalgo in Greece during the war. So I automatically was born into the Bel Canto method. I had Serafin, who, of course, later coached me, and he was, of course, worked a lot with Rosa Ponselle. So it is the old schooling, which does not exist, unfortunately, anymore.
It was the schooling, and not that you knew Ponselle or knew her voice or anything.
I never heard her. I heard her in a record. Not even in Greece, because during the war we didn't have records like that, and I never heard her until I came here in America. Of course, I am an admirer of hers, really.
Well, it was a beautiful voice.
And beautiful schooling.
Yes.
But it is the old Bel Canto schooling.
You were speaking a moment ago about your first career.
Yes, my first career, you see, I started very young, Mr. Downs. And my first career, I call in Athens. In other words, during the war, or rather, I left 2 years before from America, 1937, and the war broke out 1939. I was in Greece, and I stayed there, caught up with the war.
You were a teenager then.
Yes, I started, though, officially on stage at 13. 14, I did my first cavalleria, and from then on, I did Tiefland, Fidelio, quite a few operas.
While you were still in your teens?
Yes, of course. But
was
great singers, once upon a time, used to start very young indeed. Even my teacher, Elvira de Hidalgo, at 13 years old, she was on stage already.
And it was
women were much more mature once upon a time.
Well, that
it's true.
I'm sure it's true, but it must have been a fabulous
well, that
training.
Is what gave me my experience, I'm sure, because I had my training there, I had my stage experiences, so I had my ups and downs. By the time I came to Italy for the big career, shall I say, I had already learned so many roles. I was singing for 8 years. I had stopped singing for a year and a half, trying to find my way back to the big career. So you see, there was no surprise for me. That is why I say that this first career was most necessary to me.
Well, I'm sure it was a marvelous experience. You certainly came as an enormous surprise to me.
In other words, young girls start at 24. They say, she's very young, shall we say 25, for a role.
Yes.
It's true. I also debuted in big roles. All these roles were mine then. And I was very young, yes, but I had already an 8-year experience, 10-year experience. So you see,
this enabled you to carry
I was
off
prepared, yes.
Even things like Fidelio. That's
yes.
Absolutely amazing.
I did that just before the war. Before the war ended.
And you have sung Isolde and the Brunhildes too, haven't you?
Brunhilde and Kundry.
Oh, that would be a fabulous role for you.
Yes.
Did you enjoy singing Kundry?
Yes, it was a lovely experience, I must say. I hated the screams, but I managed them well, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it was much fun.
I should think so.
I did it the first time with Serafin, and it was Bayer in the beginning. The first time he did Parsifal. Very handsome man then.
Tell me, did you went along with this fabulous technical training in Bel Canto that you had as a very young girl? Did you also have training in acting? Because of course this is this is so rare. You have somebody who has the command of Bel Canto.
I was curious. I interrupt you, but I was most curious when I had Elvira de Hidalgo again now a month ago at my home. She will come back again, by the way. So I'll train again.
You still go on training, do you?
Well, you know, you say I'm famous, but the more famous I become, the more I have to train.
I think it's your own standards for yourself.
Yes, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid so.
Tell me about the acting.
And I asked her, well, was I since a child always easy on acting? And she says, yes, you were amazingly so. I, even then, admired the way you moved your hands and your body, and these were all new to me. And yet, she says, was considered a good actress, and I had seen the greatest, I saw that there was something different and completely your own. And she admired also then my hands. So you see, it was since I was a child. It's nothing. Though I remember that the very first experience, when I was still 13 years old, I didn't really know what to do with my hands. But I remember then we had a operetta director. He was Renato Mordo. He's dead now. And he had said then two things that stuck to my mind. One, never move your hand unless you follow it with your mind and with your soul. It's a strange way of putting it, but it's so true. It must be strings of the heart and the mind.
Well, this seems to me that it pervades everything that you do, whether it's your hands
amazing.
or your...
Well, I don't know. He's probably said this to other people, and they haven't made it their own. But I am a sponge. I love to grasp whatever other people say, and I take what's good in it, what I feel is good for me, and I leave the rest. But I am a sponge, I must say. And the second thing he said was that when your colleague sings the role to you, sings his lines, try and forget what he's supposed to say, and your reactions must be as though you had never heard what he's saying, and it's all a first reaction. So you see...
And you're able to do that?
Well, yes, so much that if he makes a mistake and forgets his words, I couldn't I couldn't give him his words. Well, I try to, at least, to live up to certain things that we've learned as youngsters.
And yet everything you do is so very much your own.
Yes, but it's always new. I try to forget on stage what I was supposed to do. And it must be studied at home, yes. But once you're in the theater on stage, it must have something new about it. You must loosen up and just, work yourself around, even if you had studied to go to the right instead of the left. Well, never mind. If it comes that you should go to the left, it's more real. The public will like it better. It should be real.
It has to be really you.
It has to be real. It has to be. And in fact, if you notice, I don't know if you followed me that much, at every performance, there's always something different.
Yes, I have noticed that.
I cannot do the same gesture the same way. It cannot be. It's like a signature. Two signatures cannot be alike.
And yet they are always Maria Callas.
Yes, but they vary because it's according to the phrase, to the voice, to what the other colleague, how he feels. There's always an elasticity about music and about art, I feel. But of course, up to a certain limit.
Yes.